diplomatic policy, speaking on the phone with the president of Taiwan. Now, the transition team says the two leaders congratulate each other in one of four phone calls Trump had with world leaders today. But the conversation with Taiwan's president in particular obviously isn't just any casual phone call. It has the potential for enormous diplomatic implications. A senior administration official says China already has reached out to the White House about the call, though we don't have more details than that. Joining me now are CNN World Affairs analyst Fareed Zakaria and CNN senior international correspondent Ivan Watson. So, Fareed, put this into perspective. I mean, I've been reading Twitter. There's a lot of people saying, well, look, so what? This is a phone call. You know, sure, it's a diplomatic break. It's not the tradition, but does it really matter?
Oh, it's a huge break with 40, as you say, 37 years of diplomatic tradition. The United States does not really recognize that Taiwan is a country. It does not recognize, it has allowed for a certain kind of constructive ambiguity.
We don't have an embassy there. We remove the embassy.
Right. In Henry Kissinger's phrase is constructive ambiguity. We don't completely buy the Chinese argument that this is all one country. But the really worrying thing about it is Donald Trump winging this, or is this part of a sustained policy that makes sense, that has been thought through? If it's the latter, fine. Let's understand what the policy is. Let's understand what the pluses and minuses are. You know, Kellyanne Conway said the president-elect is having private conversations with world leaders. Well, the president-elect and the president don't get to have private conversations really with anyone. There has historically always been a government official, a State Department note-taker, who is recording what is happening to make sure, first of all, that it is there for history, but also to make sure that the rest of the government knows what's going on.
Even if the conversation not released publicly or the information
they could be secret conversations, but they are never private in the sense that there's always somebody in the government involved. I did research on the Herbert Hoover administration when I was in college, and I was struck by the fact that even then, if the president or the Secretary of State had a conversation, there was always somebody recording it. Now, let's be clear, let's be honest, Donald Trump may have business interests in Taiwan. We know he spoke to the president of the Philippines, and he does have business interests there. In fact, his business partner has been named the special envoy from the Philippines to the United States.
We haven't been able to confirm business interests in Taiwan, although local media in Taiwan was reporting that somebody from the Trump organization was there in September looking at a location perhaps for a luxury hotel, but again, we haven't confirmed.
And precisely to be clear and sure about all this, you'd want to be sure that there's somebody taking down what happened in the conversation. So what's worrying about this is, is he winging it? Is this part of some kind of strategic plan? If it's part of a strategic plan to put pressure on China, I think it's perfectly plausible. Let's understand it. Let's hear about it. But as I say, the President of the United States, the President-elect, don't get to do this without anybody in the United States government knowing about it.
Something like this, Ivan, for Taiwan would be an enormous deal. I mean, obviously they want international recognition. They want full diplomatic relations restored with the United States.
That's right. They're relatively isolated. The Taiwanese crave official recognition, and the Taiwanese state news agency has already interpreted this phone call, declaring it an historical dialogue, that the first time in nearly 40 years. So there's a lot of symbolism here. The important thing now is, how will the Chinese react to this? Will they perhaps see this as a gaffe, or will they see this as a deliberate provocation, a step on Chinese sovereignty, since they see Taiwan very much as part of their state, even though the Taiwanese view themselves as a separate country?
CNN is reporting that a Trump transition advisor who supported Taiwanese independence was involved, or at least in the past, helped facilitate it, which it's not an impartial State Department employee. What do you make of that potential involvement?
Again, I think Ivan is exactly right. This is very thorny territory. I mean, China believes Taiwan is a province. If we are changing policy, this would be one of the largest shifts in American foreign policy in decades. And you'd hope that it would have been thought through. We have gotten everybody in the United States government on board. We understand what it is. Ronald Reagan did make a few overtures to Taiwan when he was president, but they were considered, they were very thought through, they were calculated. And by the way, China at that point was 2% of global GDP. China today is 16% of global GDP. It is the second largest economy in the world. It is the largest foreign holder, one of the largest two foreign holders of American debt. So again, it's not that you shouldn't do it. It's just let's hope that there is actually some thought behind this.
Well, I mean, that's what I was trying to ask Kellyanne Conway about. What is the process by which this is decided? She obviously, she says that, he has access to information, but she didn't really go into any level of detail. And obviously, Ivan, I mean, this comes at a, relations with China are always fraught, but there's a lot of flashpoints right now in the South China Seas and elsewhere that are, very much in the balance.
Absolutely. South China Sea, disagreement between Washington and Beijing over what China claims a huge body of water to be its own pretty much sovereign territory. North Korea, which is really considered a threat to the region, a threat to the U.S. The U.S. needs China's help to deal with North Korea. And as some people have pointed out, this kind of could potentially raise tensions at a time when you don't really need them, with some of these very serious challenges already existing on the table. People were not terribly worried that Taiwan was going to explode, even though you've had the recent election of a pretty anti-China, pro-independence Taiwanese president within recent history.
I mean, you have to remember, we need China for Iran sanctions. You can't do Iran sanctions without the UN Security Council. China has been very helpful to the United States. You need China anytime you do sanctions against anyone, anytime you want to intervene with the UN involvement, anytime you want to put sanctions on, anytime you want funding for some international project. The Chinese now, as I said, the second largest economy in the world. We want to be clear what exactly our strategy is if the point is to piss them off.
Although, I mean, throughout the campaign, Donald Trump did, I mean, you could argue that he provoked them in ways. I mean, that he was pointing out, currency manipulation, a whole host of issues.
So candidates have often done that. People sometimes forget. When Bill Clinton campaigned, he talked about the butchers of Beijing, referring to Tiananmen Square. But then you come into office, and that sobers you, and you recognize the realities, and you understand you're speaking for the whole country and the whole country's interests. And I just hope that that is what Donald Trump is thinking about, that we have the entire country to worry about, not, one particular rhetorical shot that you can take. Because were China to react badly, and it's difficult to imagine that they will simply take this quietly. They've asked to see Henry Kissinger is in China right now because they're trying to make sense of what is happening in the United States. But they have historically reacted very strongly and almost neuralgically to any kind of pro-Taiwanese sentiment.
Fareed Zakaria, thank you. Ivan Watson, great to see you. Just ahead, our political panel weighs in on President-elect Trump's call with Taiwan and its possible consequences, plus high drama in a South Carolina courtroom where the jury in the Walter Scott shooting trial has told the judge repeatedly it cannot reach a verdict.
Choose to go, to indulge your curiosity. Explore a new road to see where it takes you. Meet the leaders who change the game. No matter where you are, no matter what the currency, when you run the numbers, they may surprise you. But stay your course. You're on the path to success. CNN Money.